Welcome to Introduction to Philosophy. I'm Dr. Smith. I'm going to be your host and guide through this course. When it comes to an introductory level course like this, the first place to start is usually with the etymology of the word philosophy. It is from the Greek philosophia. Philo, which means love or lover. Sophia, which means wisdom. And so literally philosophy implies a love of wisdom, or a philosopher is a lover of wisdom. The difficulty, of course, with that basic etymological definition is the fact that it leads people to believe that it's somehow a Greek invention. It's not. The Greeks are the first ones who coined the word, but philosophy itself has been around for thousands upon thousands of years. What exactly is philosophy? Well, that's a difficult question to answer. There have been a number of interesting definitions and thoughts given over the years. Going back to Plato, Plato said philosophy begins in wonder. And so perhaps the first person that looked up into the sky and said, why? Why is this happening? What's the purpose behind all of this? Could be the origin or the beginning of philosophy. But it implies that sense of wanting to know, of needing discovery. Hegel made the statement, thus reflection, thinking things over in a general way, involves the principle, which is also the beginning of philosophy. And so again, it's that idea that we're using our mind power, we're using that part of ourselves that makes us uniquely human to be able to think about the bigger issues of existence and raise these questions about what our function is, what our purpose is, how to interact with each other, and so on. My favorite definition comes from the modern philosopher A.C. Grayling, who says philosophy is the art of thinking beyond the everyday. And what that implies is that, for the average person, we're concerned with very mundane, ordinary things. We want to know what's for dinner tonight. We want to know if there's anything fun to do this weekend. We want to know how long until work is done. But the philosopher is concerned with so many more things, bigger things. They want to know if there's any meaning or purpose to our existence. They want to know if there's anything beyond this world, or if this is it. They want to know what is the best form of government to live under. They want to know how we should interact with each other as human beings. They want to understand what the nature and concept of beauty and love are. And so the philosopher is not concerned with those everyday mundane issues. They're looking at the big questions, the big issues. And so that's, in a nutshell, what it is to be a philosopher. But of course, you'll see as we go through this class that there's a whole lot more to it than just that. Where does philosophy begin? Well, as I said earlier, nobody really knows for sure. The word philosophy goes back maybe 2,600 years ago in ancient Greece. But philosophy itself, that art of wondering and thinking beyond the everyday, goes back thousands upon thousands of years. And I would push that date back to at least probably more than 5,000 years ago. And part of the reasoning for that has to do with a work called the Epic of Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh was a warrior king in the city of Uruk, somewhere around 2600 BC. And his story has been preserved and has come down to us. Now, when the Epic of Gilgamesh begins, Gilgamesh is very pleased with himself. He's very happy because he's done all of these wonderful exploits, all of these great deeds. And so he says, I have immortality of name. For as long as I'm alive, for as long as people are alive, songs will be sung about me and people will know who I am. They will remember me. But then, one day he's engaged in a battle and his faithful companion Enkidu is killed. When Enkidu dies, this sends Gilgamesh spiraling. And he says, immortality of name is not enough. I want real immortality. I want to live forever. And so he set about to try to figure out how to do that. But in the end, all of his adventures and so on, he realizes what every human being must realize. Immortality is not possible in this life. Immortality cannot be. The one thing we know with absolute certainty is that we are going to die. We don't know when, we don't know how, but every individual will die. Now those are pretty deep, pretty profound thoughts for almost 5,000 years ago. But what's remarkable is that philosophers throughout the ages are going to continue to ask the same question and are going to continue to try to make sense of our mortality. You come into the 20th century and the existentialist movement is largely concerned with that issue. So it's one of those problems of philosophy that never seems to go away. But yet here it is, 2600 BC. Now, a thought, an idea like that doesn't just spring up overnight. It has to be something that has been there for a long time. These ideas have to have been there, brewing, building, for hundreds, if not even thousands of years before this. So how old is philosophy? We don't know. Where does it begin? We don't know. It is a worldwide phenomenon that is probably as old as humanity itself. One of the interesting things about philosophy is brought forward by the 20th century thinker Bertrand Russell. And he said the questions that we ask are actually more important than the answers. And I think that's a crucial thing for us to remember. In most disciplines, the whole point is to discover the answers. And of course philosophy wants answers. The problem is that the questions that it's asking, the things that it really wants to know, we don't have any way of determining for sure that we've got the answer. We've got lots of theories, we have lots of ideas, but do we have the actual answer? In most cases, no. But that's okay, Russell says, because the answers, anybody can come up with an answer. But the questions, that's what matters. The questions that we ask tell us something about who we are, about what interests us as a person, as a community, as a culture. And you'll find that some questions have a very limited span of interest. Maybe 50 years, maybe 100 or 200 years that question is asked, and then it's forgotten. But there are other questions, such as the one raised in the Epic of Gilgamesh about our immortality, that have been there and continue to be there. Questions we're still asking. And that is where we can really learn something about ourselves, is by wondering those questions. So as we go through this course, think about what questions are being asked. And are these questions that you've come up with or thought of yourself? There's a good likelihood that many of them you have. Ludwig Wittgenstein was another 20th century philosopher. He was an Austrian. And in a work called Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, he makes the statement, and this is actually the final line of the book, he says, of what we cannot speak, we must pass over in silence. There are a lot of issues in philosophy that are important to us, but Wittgenstein says that actually the ones that are most important to us, we don't have the language or the capacity or the ability to really understand them enough to get the answers. The most important things, the most important questions, we don't really have the language to be able to address them. Because language is developed by human beings based upon our observation of the world around us, based upon what's happening in the present moment. We create our language to communicate about everyday things. But these philosophical questions a lot of times are far beyond that. and so we're missing the language to be able to talk about them. So rather than create more confusion, Wittgenstein says, let's pass over them in silence. And it's a point that we'll see later on in the course that Søren Kierkegaard also advocates. When we study philosophy, there's a lot of branches and divisions and subdivisions and so on, but I thought we should mention the major branches of philosophy. And so the first is called epistemology. Epistemology is the study of theories of knowledge with regards to method, validity, and scope. In other words, we're trying to discover how it is that we come to know things and whether or not we can trust the things that we think we know. Metaphysics is the study of abstract concepts such as being, knowing, cause, identity, time and space. Basically, metaphysics deals with those things that are beyond the physical realm, beyond the physical level of understanding, mental or conceptual ideas. Ethics is the study of conduct, character, and the ends of human life. Basically, trying to understand what kind of character we should develop within ourselves. Should we be compassionate? Should we be generous? Should we be pious? What type of virtue should we possess, and how should we act towards other people? What's our ultimate purpose or goal as human beings? Aesthetics is the study of principles concerning the nature of beauty and taste. Now, this is actually one we don't deal with a lot in this course, but you will see it a little bit when we talk about Plato's Symposium. You go into an art gallery and different people see beauty in different things. But is there a basic underlying principle or concept of what beauty actually is? That's what we're concerned with here. Social and political philosophy is the study of the individual in society and the role of government. It's basically an offshoot or an extension of ethics. The study of the individual in society. Not just how should I act towards others and expect others to act towards me, but actually building up a government, building up a set of rules by which to live by. What's the best government to live under? And the final branch here is logic, the study and evaluation of arguments. Now, many people will say that logic is a branch of philosophy. I prefer to think of logic as a tool of philosophy, because regardless of what branch you're working with, logic is the basic tool that you're going to use in creating and evaluating the arguments that are made in those areas. Now, as we move through the class, you're also going to notice another division, another distinction, and that's between Eastern and Western philosophy. Now, the bulk of this class is based upon Western philosophy, but in the opening section, it's called Before Socrates, and within that particular section, you'll particularly see this division between the two. And so what I thought would be advisable is to talk a little bit about the difference between Eastern and Western philosophies. Starting in the East, and this is actually courtesy of David Hall, who is a philosopher at the University of Hawaii. But Eastern philosophy, what he calls first problematic philosophy, follows an aesthetic order. There's no cosmology in the sense of a beginning. There's no existence of a single ordered world. Change or process seems to be superior to rest or permanence. There's no ultimate agency that's responsible for the order of things. It uses correlative procedures rather than determining agencies or principles. And finally, it's pluralistic. So when you're talking about Eastern philosophy, you don't go back and try to discover what the origins or the beginnings of the universe are. Many times they simply talk about how things were brought into existence as the myriad things, the 10,000 things all at once. We don't try to pinpoint the origin or the beginning point as you do in Western philosophy. The idea of change or process is good. In the Western world, we try to focus upon the idea that if there's change, it means there's something wrong. We want the permanent, we want the absolute. But the Eastern philosophy sees life itself as a changing process, and so this is the natural way of things. Generally, the Eastern philosophies don't see a higher source or a higher power as being the cause of all things. When you're reading Eastern philosophies, they tend to imply more a sense of what's coming from stories, from allegories, rather than pure arguments, as you find in the West. And the idea that it's pluralistic, I think, is an important one as well. Pluralism means that there are multiple paths that a person can take, and that there are multiple endings that we can discover. It's a very open-ended kind of philosophy. And that's what you'll find in the first few readings that you have within the opening section of your text. Western philosophy, which Hall refers to as second problematic thinking, follows a logical order. Beginnings are understood in terms of chaos, emptiness, or confusion. Rest or permanence is superior to change or process. The order of things is the responsibility of some agency. It could be the will of God, it could be our mind, it could be a sense of causality, but there's something that is responsible. It uses rational principles and a logical process, and it's monolithic. Within the Western traditions, we're very concerned with what is the beginning point, and so we talk about how God creates the universe out of nothingness, the creatio ex nihilo, or we talk about the Big Bang Theory, where there's this point of singularity, and then it explodes outwards and the universe is created. But we talk about how things emerge out of that chaos or emptiness or confusion, and we're very concerned with that, whereas the Eastern philosophers are not. Whereas in the East, change and process was good. In the West, we want permanence. We want stability. We don't like change. Again, the order of things is the responsibility of something. There is a mind, there's an intelligence behind everything that's happening. The writings of the philosophers, again, they don't tend to use a lot of stories and allegories. Plato does to some extent, Nietzsche does, but most Western philosophers really don't do that. They stick more to a straight process of argumentation, logic, a line of reasoning. And Western philosophy tends to be monolithic. There is one way, there is one path to get you to that one end goal that you want to achieve. And that's it. Nothing more. If you deviate from that path, you're lost. And I think that you'll see that very strongly in this opening section of the text, where those Eastern thinkers are very open to possibility, whereas your Western thinkers, and particularly you'll see it in people like Plato, there's one place I want to get, and there's one road that I need to take to get there. But in the Eastern philosophies, the Rig Veda, for example, one of the great Vedas, it says that there are many different routes, there are many different paths that we can take in order to achieve our ultimate desire. Though the sages know it as many, though the sages know it as one, the paths are many. There's lots of ways to get where we're going. But in the East, there's one path, and you better not deviate. And so look for those differences as well as you go through this opening section. So you'll receive videos as you go through the course, and this is of course intended for my students taking online classes. If it's of benefit to anyone else out there, you're more than welcome to use the knowledge. Just cite where appropriate. But in any event, I hope everyone enjoys this class and learns a great deal. And we'll see you later.